Hello knitters and friends, welcome to Seedling Stitch Knitting Podcast. My name is Ekaterina and I am a knitter based in Vancouver, Canada, and I also am a staff member at a local yarn store here called the West Coast Wools, and I just started doing some knitwear design since 2022, and this is my space on the internet where I chat about my knitting projects and sometimes crocheting and sewing, and this is a special recap episode where I will go through all my projects that I've done this year. So I started knitting in 2021 September, so it's been like a year and a half since I've been knitting, and I think I've made a lot of progress over the past 1 year. I started podcasting in March 2022, so I mostly have covered all my knitting projects in my previous episodes in more details, and if you want to hear more about some specific projects here, you can use this episode as a catalog. And before I start, it's probably important to tell you about my measurements. I am like a women's size S. My bust measurements is like 82 to 83 centimeters. I will also tell you the finished measurements of all my garments, and I'll tell you the size that I've knitted them so that you can see how those garments fit my body, and maybe it could be some important information for you. Please feel free to grab your knitting here while watching this episode, and let's go back to January 2022 and see how this whole year of knitting gets started. I kicked off my knitting journey in 2022 with a pair of socks. This is my first pair of socks actually. These are the Sunday socks by PetiteKnit. I made a mistake by using pure merino wool to knit a pair of socks. Like, little experience did I have with socks knitting, and these socks wear quite quickly. So I learned how to do some visible mending on the heels of the socks here so that now I can wear them again. These are knitted in 4mm needles and a top-down construction, so they knitted pretty quickly, and I would recommend anyone who just starts knitting socks to try out this pattern. It is pretty well written and a quick knit for socks. Next, I finished my first sweater. It's not only for 2022, it's the first sweater that I have ever knitted, and let me try it on for you. This is the American short-haired cat sweater designed by Tokai Erika, a Japanese designer, and the design comes from this book. I have the Chinese version of the original Japanese knitting book. I knit a lot of designs from Japanese designers, so if you want to buy those books, you can go to Etsy and search for Japanese knitting books. There is a seller that's selling those original designs. Don't be afraid if you don't read the Japanese language, because the Japanese patterns are highly graphed. There's a lot of charts, schematics, so you don't have to be able to read the full language to be able to use the charts. That's the charm of the Japanese knitting patterns. And in my channel, I also have a series of videos teaching you how to use Japanese patterns, so that could be helpful. So anyway, I'm knitting this cat sweater in this book. I completely changed the color design here. That's because I don't have the yarn, and this yarn is from my grandma. So my grandma used to be a knitter, but she could not knit anymore due to arthritis, so she gifted a lot of her own stash yarn to me when I just first started knitting, and that includes like all the color palettes and in different amounts and different thickness, so I had a lot of freedom and had a lot of fun to combine those, and that includes finishing this sweater. And the color of the cats is because of my own cat. You can see there in the back there is a painting of my two cats, and I am knitting the tabby bigger cat in here. He is like brown black tabby, and I use these like yellow blackish color. I think they look very alike. and I really love this sweater. However, this sweater was really a difficult knit. It is an intarsia sweater knitted in the flat, 2 pieces, bottom up, and then seamed along this line. And the sleeves were also knitted in the flat and seams along the line and along here. So if you are knitting sweater for the first time, don't try something like this. But I only knit this because I had a lot of passion for this pattern, and I love the cat motif. I had to get it done, so I managed. I'm glad I managed that very difficult sweater. So here it is, my American short hair sweater. In Japanese designs, they usually just have one size, and it's up to the knitter to do the size adjustment. I sort of changed the needle size. The original size was 4.8mm needle. I used 4.5mm so that it's a little bit smaller and fits myself better. The finished bust measurements is 105 centimeters, so I think it's a nice fit for me anyway. And now we are in February, and I finished another cat item, which is my cat mittens. These are a pair of fingerless mittens featuring this color work and this Latvian braid. And the design is from a Japanese designer as well called Mitten Ya, and she had a book of mitten and colorwork accessories. I love this book. I've knitted a few other designs from that book as well. Highly recommend it. And it's highly diagrammed and graphed, so if you know the basic constructions of mittens, you should be able to use that pattern. That one I finished in February the 5th using my grandma's yarn and 2mm needle, so very fine gauge. And in February the 20th, I finished another 2 pairs of fingerless mittens. Those are my gifts to my parents, so they're no longer with me. And the tree motif colorwork is from the book by Mitten Ya, but it was originally for like a triangle mitten, and I adapted that mitten to be a fingerless mitten because that's what my parents wanted. Also used my grandma's yarn and with I think 3mm needles. And then we got into March, where I first finished a little scarf. It is the Seaweed Scarf by a Japanese designer, Kazekobo, and from a Japanese scarf book. I'll put the name of the book in the description. This is a quick knit. I finished this in 2 days, I think. Also using my grandma's yarn and 5 or 6mm needle. It's like an Aran weight yarn. And I used all of my grandma's yarn in this color. It's just like a stash busting project. And the next one on March the 8th, I finished another accessory, which was this cable hat. Again, using my grandma's yarn. I think I used up some of the yarns in the middle, so I have to change the colors. So there are a few different shades and textures in this hat. The cable patterns look quite pretty. It's like a large and warm hat. The design comes from this Japanese book, Chinese translation, called The Daily Handknitting, and I am knitting their like yellow Tongari cap, which is like a sharp tip top hat kind of thing. Yeah, this is quite warm and I wear it a lot during winter times, and it looks very nice, very like winter season. Next we go to March the 20th, where I finished my second sweater of this year, which is my purple cardigan. Let me wear it. This is my cardigan number 8, designed by my favorite things Knitwear, and the yarn I used was holding 4 strands of host yarn from different lines, like I think 2 strands of their super soft, one strand of their ties, which is like a silk wool yarn, and one strand of their PetiteKnit, which is like their lace weight alpaca yarn. The original design was using a tweedy yarn, very expensive, so I chose some substitution with Hostgarn yarn, which is more affordable. And I used slightly different purple colors of yarn so that it had this heather effect, and I really love this color. This knits up very quickly. It's like in 5.5mm needles and a drop shoulder design, like you cast on the back, doing some increases to form this like diagonal line, and then pick up stitches to knit up the front, and then you join the front and the back and just knit in the flat. So a lot of knitting and a lot of purling, but that's okay. It also features this double knitted button band. This is the first time I ever do double knitted button band, and I enjoy the effect. Just doing in this chunky gauge, it makes everything more manageable. And there's also a pocket, and which is quite handy. I knitted the size M of the pattern, which I think is a bit too big for me. The finished bust circumference is 136 centimeters, so it's kind of huge, and the sleeve is very long. I even reduced a few rows for the sleeve, but it's still quite long for me. But it's nice as like a jacket for spring and autumn. Like I can wear some lightweight sweaters inside it, and it looks pretty nice. And when I just finished this one, it was during the cherry blossom season, and I took some slow-mo videos outside with all those like fallen cherry blossom petals. It was very romantic. I'll put the video back there. And it's just like a nice easy throw on cardigan whenever I need some extra warmth. So I do enjoy this pattern, and this is more like a beginner level garment pattern for me. So yeah, if you want to knit your first cardigan, you could try on this pattern. Next one, we go to April. And as I said, it was the cherry blossom season, and I was super inspired by the beautiful cherry blossoms that I decided to design a colorwork item out of it. And this is my first ever knitting pattern published on Ravelry, and this is called the Yinghua Cowl, or cherry blossom cowl in English, and it features these cherry blossom flowers. I knitted with 3 strands of Hostgarn Coast yarn in the color powder, and this blue yarn is from my grandma, but there is a similar color in the Hostgarn as well. And this is my first ever design, and I'm quite proud of it. It's easy as a first colorwork item as well. So that's the cherry blossom cowl. And then on April the 5th, I finished another design. These are the Huli mittens, or fox mittens. I have already gifted them to my friends, Yuran. If you have watched my episode 13, I did an interview with my friend Yuran, just chatting all our hand-making, crafting projects together. That mitten was a birthday gift for her, and she asked for a fox motif, but I sort of made an abstract fox motif into that pattern. It is a fingerless mitten knitted in 4mm needle, and although it seems very complicated, you only ever knit 2 different colors on each row, so it's like a traditional Fir Hat design, and not so hard to knit and quite warm. And then I published yet another pattern. So I was in a very creative phase in April, it seems. I designed my first pair of socks. These are the Seedling Socks, designed by myself. As you know, my channel is called the Seedling Stitch, and that comes from my Chinese name. My Chinese name is Xiaohe, which means seedling. And I just think it's a good symbol for like growing for me as a knitter and growing as a person in general. So I designed these little seedling motif onto this pair of socks. This is the top-down sock design with the Dutch heel. I knitted with the Sandnes Garn Sisu yarn, and this has already been published on Ravelry as well. If you're interested, you could check. So now we arrive at May, and on May I finished another garment, which is the Sille Slipover by PetiteKnit. This was a gift for my mom, so it's no longer with me. And the Sille Slipover has a very similar construction to this cardigan number 8 that I'm wearing, apart from like without the sleeves, obviously. It was also knitted on the back with a drop shoulder construction, and you pick up stitches and knitted the front, and then you knit in the round for the body, which is easier than like this cardigan type of construction. And in the Sille Slipover, it features those jig-jag motifs with knit and purl stitches. So it's like a simple but effective structure knits, and I quite enjoy knitting it. I made a modification on this pattern. The original pattern had a round neck, but my mom has demanded that she wants a V-neck because that will like fit better with like shirt. So I managed to adapt the round neck to a V-neck, and if you want to see more details of how my modification works, you can check my episode 5 or 6. I'll link that above there. And apart from that, I think I knitted the size M, and because that's for my mom, so I want that to fit her better. But it's also a nice fit for me, like a little bit oversized, but if I wear like a larger shirt in it, it's a pretty nice fit. The finished bust size is 106 centimeter, I think very similar as the original design. And I used my grandma's cocoa colored yarn, so there's not much information I could say there. So that's the Sille Slipover for the month of May. And then we arrive at the month of June, where I designed another pair of socks. These are the Seedling Socks, and these are a pair of toe up socks featuring this cable pattern. Let's see this way. If you see it this way, this looks like the Chinese character Lin, which means like forest. As I've said, I have designed a pair of Seedling Socks inspired by my own name, and this pair of socks was designed inspired by my husband's name, which is Lin. So there it is. And also because it's a toe-up socks, you can decide how long you want the cuff to be. I think the toe-up socks is my favorite sock construction of all. I will get into that in a bit later. And then on the end of June, which is June the 28th, I finished another garment, which is a summer pair of garment called the Provence top, designed by Ekaterina Vorobeva, and let me wear it on. This is my first ever summer top. So summer came, weather got very hot, it's no longer appropriate for knitting with wool, so I looked for some linen yarn. This is actually a Chinese yarn called Suyu, which is a Chinese hemp yarn. It feels very much like linen, and I got this nice bluey color, and I wanted to try lace knitting. I think this is my first ever lace knitting project, and I think I did it pretty well. I changed the gauge because the original design was knitted with a DK weight yarn, and this yarn I had was like a sports weight. So in order to use this yarn, I had to knit the XL size, but in a 3.5 millimeter, like in a finer gauge. I did some calculation. If you want to see like how I did the calculation to choose the appropriate size, and changing the gauge, you can look at my episode something. I'll put it here. And anyway, after playing with the gauge and selecting the size, this finished size is similar to its original size S, and it is an 84 centimeter bust, and it fits me pretty well. I'll spin around. And I really like this lace pattern. It has this V-neck silhouette on the front, but it's like a horizontal silhouette on the back. It's also very cool for wearing in the summer weather. And I did another modification, which is here on the hem. I found a different lace pattern. I was knitting top down here just for the hem, and I chose a similar like Provence lavender lace pattern to put in here to the ribbon, like to echo whatever here the lace pattern on the top. And I think I enjoyed my modification. I didn't knit it as long as the original design because I was afraid that I won't have enough yarn, so it's a much cropped length. Okay, so now we arrive at the month of July. Still summer, and I got into sock knitting, and I finished 2 pairs of socks, and this is also my own sock design. So the story behind this pair of socks is that I was working at West Coast Wools at like a teacher at that time, and the shop owner asked me to teach a toe up socks class, and I was looking for patterns on Ravelry for toe up socks, but like there's just some little things I don't like for all those existing free patterns, so I decided to draft my own toe up socks pattern, which is here. It is the no frills toe up socks, and you use Turkish cast on for the toe, and then you do the German short rolls for the heel turn, and you do a slip stitch heel, and then then you do the cuff. It's quite basic. I made a few variations for the sock, like you can knit the plain version. This is the plain stockinette version. You can knit the 2x2 rib version, and there's also a 3x1 rib version. And the yarn I used here is a Chinese sock yarn called 回归线织足, but it's very hard for you to get it anywhere else in the world other than China, so it's not very useful information, but I'd just like to share the finished result with you here. And on July the 25th, I finished yet another item, which is Charlotte the Fox from this book, Knitted Animal Friends. And this was a gift for my friend, so it's no longer with me here now, but I'll just put a picture here, and you can also check my episode 12. I'll put a link in there. She is a huge fox, like 40 centimeters long, and I also knitted the linen coat for her, the little dress for her, and the messenger bag, so it was quite an intense knit. And I really enjoy the finished results, and it was a wedding gift for my friends, and my friends also enjoyed the gift, so I was glad. And also I launched the Animal Friend Knit Along because of my animal knitting, and that went pretty well as well. So if you are interested in knitting animal dolls, feel free to join my Ravelry group in the Animal Friend KAL, and you can look at all the other participants who have chosen their interesting animal knitting patterns and have made their beautiful animal friends. And then we arrive at the end of July, and I finished a little hand knitted bag. This is yet another one of my own designs. I call this the Upcycled Project Bag because I used all the scraps of my grandma's yarn. There's just like random 50 gram or 10 gram of yarn in my grandma's stash, and I didn't know how to use them, and I needed a bag at that point, so I figured I could knit a little bag out of it. So it's a simple construction. You knit the bottom and then you knit in the round in stockinette stitch, and you do this little picot edge, and you do an egg cord for the drawstring, and you knit the belt in the round, and then you can use it. So the pattern is on Ravelry, and feel free to give it a look. And now I think we arrive at July. In July the weather becomes a bit too hot and you can't really do much knitting. So I've only finished one item in July, which is the June toplet, not the July toplet, from PetiteKnit, and let me wear it. This is also knitted with the Chinese hemp yarn Suyu, as the same one as I did for the Provence top, but this time the gauge is the same as in the pattern, so I don't have to do any adjustment in that. And I knitted the size S. The finished bust measurements is 76 centimeter, and I'll just spin around to show you the finished result. I made quite a few modifications on the pattern, as you probably already found out. The original pattern is a plain color camisole thing, and for me, I don't have enough yarn in any single color, so I combined this navy and the white color to knit these stripes. And I also found plain stockinette knitting to be boring, so I added some of these like triangle lace pattern here on the body. And another modification is I added a crocheted cord like here to tie between the two shoulder straps, because I find, I don't know if it's the yarn or the design, I find my shoulder strap to be like dropping like these quite often, and I just want some extra security on the straps, so I added that little cord. In the summer season this year in Vancouver, it was quite hot and we don't have air condition here in our homes, so I mostly just wear this without inner garment anyway, and it is very breathable, so it was helpful for the very hot weathers. So now we arrive at the month of September, and the first thing I finished was yet another pair of socks and my own design. These are called the Porcelain Socks. I have already gifted them to my friends in New York, so they are no longer with me. It is a pair of colorwork socks featuring some traditional motifs you could see in Chinese blue and white porcelain, and I have also included a cultural notes in this pattern so that you can learn all the culture behind those designs. It was quite interesting. I made this design originally for the 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 2 submission call by Land magazine, but unfortunately my design didn't get picked, but it was okay. I got to publish that on Ravelry as well. As for construction, I knitted from toe up, just in a tube, and the heel was like an afterthought heel. And I know recently another designer, she designed a porcelain sweater, and it looks quite popular, also featuring the blue and white color scheme, but you can see that her colorwork design is quite Nordic than Oriental. It's more like the 8-petal rose or snowflake type of pattern that's commonly seen in Norwegian colorwork designs. So yeah, culturally it's quite different, and it's quite interesting to see similar ideas but designed from people from different cultures. And I also intend to adapt my colorwork in these porcelain socks to a sweater. But I don't know, in Chinese culture, if you call someone like a porcelain container, you are like saying they are very hollow. So it's not a good thing to wear something that exactly looks like a porcelain on your body culturally. So I'm thinking maybe I'll just put that colorwork motif on the sleeves, and that will like tone down the whole porcelain theme, but also preserve the beauty of the colorwork design. I don't know, I have a lot of design ideas that I want to try this year, and we'll see. In September, I also started learning crochet. I think as a knitter, it's not too hard to pick up crochet. And on September, I had a few finished items. The first one I finished is this little corn. The pattern is from a book called Crochet Cafe by Lauren Espy. The only thing is that the color of the yarn is not quite good. It looks very orange. It looks like a roasted corn or like a sausage or a carrot. But anyway, now I just use this as a pin pillow. I put my yarn needles on top of it. And then another crocheted item I finished in September 10th is this little mooncake. During that time, it was the Moon Festival in China and a few other Asian countries. And in the Moon Festival, we eat mooncakes that looks like this. And there was a Chinese designer making this tutorial. She's called 小师妹手作. She's also on YouTube as well. And I followed the video tutorial and made this. It's quite cute. And then on September 11th, I finished another sweater here. And let me try it on. This is the Fortune sweater designed by PetiteKnit, and this was knitted with the Danish yarn Kamaros midnight saw, which is like a brushed alpaca yarn. And this was a sample knit for my local yarn store, White Coast Wools. So the yarn was free, but the item was displayed in the store for a while. And I actually brought this back just last weekend so that I can film this episode, and then I will return this to the yarn store for making more sales. And I believe this garment has probably made quite a few sales because I've seen a lot of customers at the yarn shop had their eye on this sweater and decided to buy this yarn. So I was quite glad that I made this. And this is actually my first raglan, like top-down raglan sweater. It's quite a simple construction, top-down and with some German short roll on the back shaping. And it features these like clove eyelet lace patterns all over. I knitted the size S, and I believe I was right on gauge, and the finished bust measurements is 105 centimeter, and I think it's quite a nice fit for my body, and I would wear this with like a French tuck here. And because of the brushed alpaca, the drape is quite well, and it's also very warm. It's quite warm, although it's like it looks quite translucent and quite light. It's so warm. The original pattern called for like those silk mohair yarn holding two strands together, but this midnight saw yarn is an exact substitute for the silk mohair yarn, and it probably feels softer, nicer on your skin as well. And this is like 3/4 length sleeves, and the color of the yarn is 9512, like a greenish color. I am obsessed with this color. It looks so good and matches with my glasses, matches with my watch belt, it matches with everything. I am like, this color is me. And this is a double folded collar. It's the first time that I do double folded collar as well. And just after blocking, the color was kind of like that. And yesterday, as I brought it back home, I was able to add in a elastic thread here so that it sits nicer on my neck. And yeah, I'm happy with the little adjustment I could make well with the time that I brought it back. And I'm also happy that I get to wear it for a couple of days before I return this back to the yarn store. Okay, and then September 17th, I finished something else. I finished 2 pairs of socks, one for my partner, one pair for myself. These are the Kiwi socks yarn. This sock is like a self-patterning yarn from Flat Sock Fruit Fresh or something. I'll print this on the screen. And I bought 1 ball of 100 gram and I get 2 pairs of sock out of it, with some contrasting color heel and toe with the Handknit Scarf Sisu yarn. The pattern again is from my No Frills Toe Up Socks, but I made a little modification for the heel flap, where for this one I made a honeycomb stitch. And for my husband's, I made a staggered slip stitch heel. I think this is my favorite type of heel. It looks more classic than the slip stitch heel. It looks more sturdy and more muted. I think this is going to be my go-to heel flap pattern in the future. And next, September, I finished another item, that's the Sophie scarf. I see a lot of people making a croissant out of these Sophie scarves, and I make this one too, but mine is too green to be like a croissant, or it could be like a matcha flavored croissant if you say so. And it's like this. It is the Sophie scarf designed by PetiteKnit, but I didn't really buy the pattern. I just sort of see the construction and try to figure out how to do it by myself, which is bad or not bad, I don't know. I knitted with the Handknit Scarf Double Sunday, which is a 100% merino yarn, so it's very nice on my neck. And I finished this with 40 gram of it, so just a little bit less than a ball. So it's a really nice stash buster project. And I used 4mm needles, so larger than what the pattern called for. So my finished scarf is a little bit larger. And this is my most worn neck accessory that I made this year. You can just pop this on anytime. And if you know me, you know I have a lot of greenish colored clothes, so this scarf goes well with all the garment that I have. And sometimes I wear black or dark color thing, and this shade of green also just adds in the color pop into the whole outfit. Oh, the color name of this double Sunday is Statement Green. I probably bought that ball of yarn because of the name. I like the name of Statement Green. I think I should make a statement that I love the color green. So there it is. And now we arrive at the month of October, and I made my first hat design. This is my pine and fir hat. It is a cabled patterned toque and knitted from brim up with this folded brim. And then you have this shorter cable pattern that's running all through the hat. And then this is the pine cable pattern with the little bubble for the pine cone. And then this is the fir cable pattern. And this is probably by far my most well sold pattern. I think I sold more copies of this pattern than any other patterns that I had. And I knitted this one on 3.5 and 4mm needles. And it probably looks better in a pine green kind of color than this black. But this is the yarn that I had in stash, so I just used it. And it goes well with my hair color, as my hair is black. And next one, in October the 3rd, I finished one of my proudest garment of the year. And let me pop this on. This is my Fir vest, coming from a Japanese book, Chinese translation, The Knitting, designed by Kazekobo, which is a famous Japanese designer for, especially for Fir designs. This is like any traditional Fir design, knitted bottom up in the round, and steeking. This is the first time that I ever do steeking, which means I'm gonna knit in a tube for the whole thing, and like after I finish knitting it will look like this, and then I will cut through the fabric, and you can see this is the edge of the cut line. I folded it over and sewed it in to secure it, and then I pick up stitches around the steek line and knit this ribbed edge. And I did like a live steeking episode. I'll just insert that steeking footage here as well, and you can hear the sound of the scissors cutting through the fabric. It was scary at first, but just after a few cuts you see that the yarn was holding together so well, so there's no worry at all. The yarn I used is the same as what the pattern called for, which is the Jamieson's Shetland Spindrift. So it will felt a little bit while you knit them, so the yarn will like stick with each other, so it won't unravel if you do the steeking. And it's such a beautiful woolen warm yarn, and I really love it. And the finished bust measurements was 99 centimeter. I knitted this item for my PhD defense. If you're new here, I now have a PhD in mechanical engineering, and I just graduated this year. I did my PhD defense in November 15th, and I wanted to have like a nice formal hand-knitted garment for my PhD defense, so I selected this. I'm super glad I was able to finish that before my PhD defense and succeeded in like passing my PhD defense and graduated my PhD and everything. It had been a tough year for me, and just based on how much knitting I have done, you can probably feel how stressful I was over the year and how much knitting had helped me stay mentally healthy throughout the year. So thanks to knitting, I have a PhD now. After that, I finished another little item. This is my Lulu little bunny. She is so small. She is like the size of my palm, and I have a small hand. She is so small, so cute. I knitted like following everything from the pattern, and the favorite part of the bunny is that it has this button mechanism for the leg, so that the leg can rotate like this, so the bunny can stand or sit. I don't think I've seen this leg construction for any other knitted animal, and I think this is a really clever and good method to attach the leg to the body so that the animal will stay cute sitting or standing. And normally I put my little Lulu bunny at the back with the other bigger two animals so that they look like a like a little animal family. And then I finished this flower Fir berry hat. The pattern is also from the Japanese knitting book by Kazekobo, but I changed the color scheme using the leftover yarn from my Fir vest. And this is a berry hat, and it's just pretty chic with this flower pattern. It's quite warm also, although it looks quite thin, but with the Spindrift Shetland yarn, it's quite warm. And also because of the colorwork knitting, there are like 2 layers of yarn there, so it's quite nice. Yeah, I wear this a lot. And now we arrive in November. On November, I did my PhD defense and a bunch of other things. One thing is I finished my crocheted bag. So there sort of is a pattern. I found the Buttercup bag by Seaweed Scarf from their magazine, but I cannot get the magazine. I can only see a few pictures posted by the Seaweed Scarf Instagram, and I really liked the look of the bag. So I just tried to figure out the construction of the bag by myself. I found some tutorial on how to do this sunflower granny square, so I crocheted 8 of them and then crocheted a side panel and joined them and then made the handle. It might not be the same as the original Buttercup bag, but it's working, so it looks pretty nice. The yarn is from my grandma. I used all the green yarn and the green-yellow yarn, so it's a nice stash basting project, and I also like the color scheme. It looks quite vintage. And next one, we have another knitted garment, which is my own design. Let me try it on. This is my Harbin Sweater, which is like an Icelandic round yoke sweater design. This is my first sweater design. Also, I finished writing the pattern. It is currently in test knitting now. The pattern will probably release in February if everything goes well. And just show you a whole look of it. I also took some nice photos and videos during the snowy days. So the name of the sweater is from my hometown, Harbin, which is in the northeast of China, a very cold place featuring a lot of snow, and all the motifs on this sweater is inspired from common scene from my hometown, like these pine leaves, and this is like the steel frame bridge in my hometown, and this is like the Saint Sophia Cathedral in my hometown, and these are the ice bars, and these on the cuffs and bottoms are like snowflakes melting onto a white ground. The yarn I used was Eastex Let Lopi. It's very warm, quite scratchy, but at this point I'm okay with the scratchiness now. I have been conditioned to accept the scratchiness, so it's okay for me now. For my pattern, I graded this from XS up to 5XL, but I haven't gotten any test knitters for 4XL and for 5XL, so if you want to test knit those larger sizes, please message me anywhere. Anyway, I want this to be size inclusive. It's not too hard to grade like a round yoke pattern like this, so I did that. I knitted the size M for myself, and the finished bust measurements is like 98 centimeter. The length is like 62 centimeter, so it's quite an oversized fit for me, but that's exactly what I wanted. Because I wanted to be able to like just wear this as an outer garment if needed, and it's really oversized and cozy, so I love it. And after this one, I knitted 5 Christmas balls, and those are from the Arnie and Carlos 2019 mini Christmas ball collection, and those are gifts for my PhD supervisors and lab managers. So no longer with me, but I intended to knit a few more Christmas ball for myself, but I just didn't really find the time while knitting all these things that I'm gonna show you. There's an honorable mention I have to say. I have a sewing project, which is my machine sewn bag. So I've seen a lot of knitting podcasters here who's also sewist, and I wanted to try sewing, so I signed up for a sewing class just right after my PhD defense, like as a reward for myself. And this is the project that we did for the class. It's a reversible bag, 2 colors with a pocket here and handles, and I quite enjoyed doing the sewing, and it's a very handy bag. I'm using it every day to work now actually. And I bought a sewing machine. It's arriving probably in a couple of weeks, and I bought a few sewing books, so I'm very excited to try sewing, and maybe we'll have some sewing content this year. And yet I had another finished garment in the month of November, and it's this one. Let me try it on. This is the Amy Slipover by Seaweed Scarf magazine from their 2202 collection, and just showing you the original version. And this was knitted with their Sunday and tin silk mohair yarn, but my version is knitted with my grandma's yarn, and I'm proud to say that I finished using all this color of yarn. This design just had one size, so I knitted everything according to the pattern. The finished bust measurements is 86 centimeter, but it really doesn't matter because it had this straps, so you can make it wider. So it's just a like really nice chic pattern, and you can wear it like this if you don't want to wear a scarf for the winter, and you can also wear it on top of another sweater for extra warmth. So I really enjoy this one. Next we arrive at December, and I finished a similar thing as the Amy Slipover. This is the color number 3 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I knitted the size S, and this is my first brioche project, where I learned mostly all the important techniques for doing brioche. It looks quite nice too, and now it just looks too warm for everything. It's just a good neck accessory, looks quite classic. The yarn I used is my grandma's yarn again. I didn't finish using all this gray white colored yarn, but that's okay, I can use this yarn for anything. And finally, on December 31st, last day, I finished my final and most difficult, most beautiful colorwork sweater I ever made, and let me just try it on now. Yeah, I guess you must have been wondering, what were you wearing at the beginning of this video? What is that beautiful colorwork sweater? And now we finally get to it. This is the Wall Garden pullover by a Japanese designer, Tokai Erika. She is also the designer of this book, like of my American short hair cat sweater. The pattern of this design is sold together with the yarn kit. So I bought the yarn kit from Puppy Yarn Official, which is a Japanese yarn brand, and they have their English version of the website, and you can order their kit from PayPal, but this is like a limited edition of the kit. You can still order it now, but it's probably only limited for a year or less than a year. And just let me show you this video of me modeling it in my patio in a better lighting. It's just so romantic. And the pattern itself is in Japanese, but as I said, you don't really have to know a lot of Japanese language, or you can just use the basic, you know, Google translation to understand some of the keywords, and then you should be able to use it. And I had no problem using the pattern, but yeah, I also know a little bit of Japanese, so that was helpful. And the construction for the sweater is knitted bottom up in the flat, and you knit the front and back piece separately, and then use the mattress stitch to sew along these two lines and also along the shoulder. There were some shoulder shaping with the Japanese short rolls. And for the sleeve, you also knit in the flat because there is some intarsia colorwork here as well, and sew along the bottom, and then you plug the sleeve into the body with some crocheted slip stitch. And the original pattern, they only have one size, and it was a 110 centimeter bust. I thought it was too big for me, so I reduced the needle size a little bit to 4.5 millimeter. The original was 4.8 millimeter, so it was a bit smaller. But when I was knitting the sleeves, I was very loose while I knitted it, so the gauge on the sleeve was actually pretty close to the pattern itself, so it's resulting in like a little bit of actual fabric here in the sleeve. But who cares? Who cares these little imperfections on the sleeves when I have all these, you know, eye-catching color work in the front? So I'm happy. I'm 100% happy with the sweater. Oh, and one more thing. I knitted the back too tightly, so it resulting that my back piece was like 5 to 6 centimeters shorter than the front. So I added some short rows on the back so that the front and back could match in length. And you can see there is like a line here, that is where I did the short rows. And I also knitted a couple extra rows here on the bottom, just so the stem of the flower is a bit longer than the original design. All these stems and the leaves of the dandelion are embroidered, and the frame of the window was also embroidered. But other than that, all the rest of the color work were knitted with intarsia or stranded color work, like depending on the position. It's like a combination of both color work techniques. I finished the knitting part by December 31st, so I will still call the pattern to be finished in 2022, although the embroidery part was finished on January the 1st of 2023. But I think you will forgive me for calling this a 2022 project. And that's everything I've knitted in 2022. In together, there are 10 garments, and I did 9 original designs, among which 8 have been published on Ravelry, and the Harbin Sweater is in testing. And I did 33 projects all together, where I have like shown here. So a lot of knitting, and I look forward to do more knitting in the coming year and keep bringing you more knitting inspiration for the whole year. If you enjoyed my knitting content, please consider subscribe if you haven't on my channel, and comment which of these projects are your favorite, or what is your proudest project that you have made for the year of 2022. And if you would like to support my knitting content creation, please consider donating on my Ko-fi page, ko-fi.com/seedlingstitch. You can buy me a Ko-fi for one time or become a monthly subscriber, or you can also support me by buying my knitting patterns if you like any of those designs. So thank you for watching my video, and as a tradition, I always play a bit of piano on the end of my episodes, and I play this on my antique piano, so the sound quality is not the best, but I just want to share my passion with you. So that's everything for this episode. See you then, and happy knitting! Happy New Year! Bye!